Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. As the war in Ukraine shows no signs of abating, the military conflict has other important impacts for Russia, Europe, and the rest of the world. I'm pleased to welcome back Bill Reinsch. He is the Scholl Chair in International Business at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Welcome back.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you again.
I guess, first of all, tell us where you think this war is going and what it means for Vladimir Putin and for Russia.
Well, I think I'm not a military person, but all signs point to stalemate. The Russians have underperformed, and the Ukrainians have dug in and show no sign really of surrendering or giving up, which suggests that this may go on for quite a while, unfortunately, because it's creating enormous amounts of damage and a lot of lives are being lost. But there are no signs that the Russians are going to retreat or give up. And likewise for the Ukrainians, there are talks. We'll see where they go. But right now, I don't see a lot of optimism about it. If you think long term for Putin, I don't think there's any way to look at this but as a disaster. I mean, what he's done is, demolish the multilateral institutions and rule of law that we spent 75 years building up to make sure this wouldn't happen again. He's recreating a might makes right world, which is not really in the interest of anybody. He's succeeded in getting Germany to reverse its 70-year defense policy and start providing weapons to, in this case, Ukraine. He's gotten Sweden and Finland to think about joining NATO. He's coming perilously close to defaulting on Russian bonds. And that doesn't even get to the question of what he's doing to their economy. The ruble has tanked. I think in the long run, inflation and difficulty getting products from the outside is going to make things very, very unpleasant for Russian citizens. What's remarkable about it, too, has been the way that the West has united and act very quickly on this. That doesn't always happen, and there's often division on these things. In this case, everybody was together, and I think it's been magnified by what I've called self-sanctioning. You've got a lot of companies who are just saying, the government's not ordered us to do this, but we're not going to sell them anything. We're not going to buy anything from them. We're just getting out of Russia because we think it's the right thing to do. That's compelling. That says something about the isolation that Putin's going to experience.
Yeah, no, and we're going to unpack all of that because I think that's really important. Just to return to the state of Russia's economy, they did avoid default last week, obviously, but your assessment is that can't last forever, and also they've lost the ability to be called a reliable energy supplier, I guess. So those are a couple of perhaps longer-term trends.
I think so. I mean, their energy has not yet been cut off. I mean, the president, our president, is in Brussels today. We'll see what announcements they make going forward. There's been some talk of cutting off oil purchases, but not gas. But we'll see. But I think that what this does is basically tell the rest of the world that they shouldn't rely on Russia and they can't trust Russia's intentions. So the reality is people are gonna look elsewhere for what they need. They're gonna look elsewhere for oil. Now, in the short term, that's going to produce some dislocations, but in the long term, I think you're going to see movement away from Russian fossil fuels. And it's a commodity. It's a fungible market. There are other sources.
Tell us what you think about the general impact to supply chains of this situation.
Well, we're kind of the first thing to say about it is we're having a lot of disruption and sort of it's a whack-a-mole kind of thing. Every week, every month, there's a new thing that we're out of. It was toilet paper in the United States in 2020. Then it was semiconductor chips last year and this year. It's about to be food, at least in the Middle East and North Africa. I don't think it's going to be food in the United States, but even on a consumer level, every time my wife comes back from the grocery store, she talks to me about something that's not there. 1 month it was pet food. No one knows why, but it just wasn't there.
Bill, we're going to have to take a brief break. Hold that thought. Welcome back. Bill Reinsch, you were talking about supply chains before we took our break. Please continue with your thought.
Yes, well, I'll move beyond pet food. I think what's happening is supply and demand seem to be out of whack, and we seem to have a lot of difficulty getting it back together. Resources are strained, and as we learned during the time of COVID, the global transportation structure is under a great deal of stress. It's not as bad as it was 6 months ago, but we still got container ships backed up outside of West Coast ports. And we're going to have, I think, continuing shortages. The result is that companies are reevaluating their supply chains. And the problem, of course, is that you don't do that overnight. You've got contractual obligations, and you've got the problem of finding new ones. And that doesn't just mean identifying somebody. You've got to satisfy yourself that their quality is going to be good. Their delivery is going to be good. They can match the volume that you need. They can scale up as needed. All of that takes time. And so you're going to see some evolution over time. But what supply chain managers have learned, and they learned it because of Trump's tariffs, and they learned it because of COVID, and they're learning it again because of Russia, is that it's not just lowest price, best quality, best delivery. It's also resilience. How do we make sure that our supply chain is not compromised and that we can get what we need? And that means you have to have a plan B and a plan C and build more local production into your supply chain so you've got alternatives. No more all eggs in one basket.
Let's talk a little bit more about these corporations, these non-state actors that have, even cultural groups that have been uniform in exiting Russia in some form or another, either as a market or as a partner. I must say, I was a little surprised about how this went along over the last few weeks, because that was something that I had not considered something that was possible. But there must be a lot of pressure from shareholders, a lot of pressure from stakeholders, maybe even employees in some of these business and other organizations. It really does mean that what happens when you are the embodiment of the state, such as Putin, the knockdown effects that you could have on your country's position in the world, quite apart from military and even economic. Is that something that surprised you as well?
A little bit, yes. And I think it's all due, actually, to these. This is a much more public war than past wars. I mean, all wars are public because they're happening. But what you've got now are people in real time taking photos, making videos of burning buildings, of rocket attacks, of bodies in the street, posting them immediately on the internet, and they're going viral. This war is being brought home, every day into people's houses. And the Russians are doing their best to cover it up in Russia, but the rest of the world is seeing that. And I think you can see it in public opinion. I think you can see it in the level of outrage. People understanding that this was an unprovoked attack, and the result is extraordinary damage and death, all for no purpose. And this is, I think, solidifying global public opinion against Russia and against Putin. And he and the country are going to be pariahs for a long time. I mean, you may find a few countries secretly cooperating. You don't find very many countries standing up and saying he's doing the right thing. He's really isolated.
Returning to supply chains for a second, you've talked about how there could be some next stage supply chain disruptions, beyond oil and gas. You just mentioned food supply, critical minerals. Are these things that you see just around the corner, or is this a longer term threat?
Both. One problem is it's hard to predict. I had a call yesterday with some think tank colleagues in Europe, And we talked about this, and I said, "What's going on there?" And one of the comments they made is that at least one major company has had to shut down its auto assembly line because they were getting cables, wire cables from Ukraine. They can't get them anymore. That was kind of unexpected, and that's one of the problems with supply chains. In a globally integrated economy, there are always these unexpected developments, and there's always going to be collateral damage. For the United States, we're less exposed than Russia is. We don't depend on Russian. I'm sorry, we're less exposed than Europe is.
Right.
We don't depend on Russia for
Bill,
much
we're
energy.
just going to take another brief break. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm here with Bill Reinsch. He is a member of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Bill, we were talking about longer-term supply chain disruptions. Please finish your thought on that.
I think for the United States, there are some particular things, critical minerals, mostly palladium, titanium, nickel, which have specific uses that we get a lot of it from Russia. They're not a sole supplier. There's going to be disruptions. And the most, I think, obvious impact is that there's going to be price increases. This is going to be inflationary, moving things around, particularly moving commodity sources around is going to involve higher prices. You can see this in food already. The grain and edible oil shortages are going to hit the Middle East and North Africa, and actually the rest of Africa as well, particularly hard because they get wheat, corn, and edible oils from Ukraine and Russia, and everything from Ukraine is blocked right now. But these are global commodities, and price is going to go up everywhere. I think probably the Canadian farmers and American farmers can look at this from one point of view as an opportunity. Demand is going to remain high, and they can fill the supply gap. But that gets back to the supply chain issue. Getting the grain from Canada, getting it from East Coast ports or from the United States, from East Coast ports to the Middle East, to North Africa, to Europe. That means carving out some new channels, exploring some linkages that we haven't used before. That, again, it takes time. It's going to be disruptive.
Obviously, one of the debates that's happening in Europe right now is what to do about their fossil fuel intake from Russia, and some are looking for alternative suppliers of that, and others are saying this is an opportunity to speed up the exit completely from fossil fuels, go to renewables. What's your take on that?
Yeah, they're kind of in a difficult position, and this is the one area where I think it's going to turn out to be the most difficult to maintain Western unity, because in the short run, the European dependence, certainly on Russian gas, is significant. Now, as warm weather comes, the immediate problem becomes a little less, but it's going to be important for Europe to replenish its stocks to get ready for the next winter. But their dilemma is that they've pretty much decided to get off Russian gas, but they also want to get off gas, period, for climate reasons. And that puts them in a tighter spot, because they also don't want to go back to coal, which they've got. But they've been trying to get rid of that. Germany made the decision some years ago to close down its nuclear facilities. And I don't see signs that that's being rethought. France did not do that, so they're in kind of a different position.
Right.
I think they've got some rather significant energy challenges in front of them. The United States, as a major exporter, can help with that, particularly on the gas front. But there are supply chain issues. You need terminals and you need ships.
Right. Yeah. So it's not going to be an immediate wave the magic wand and it's going to be solved for sure.
Exactly.
You've talked a little bit about the impact of this war on technology and worldwide systems. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think we're heading toward fragmentation, and particularly of the internet, the splinternet, so-called. and not just in two. And it's not just about Russia. Russia's not the major player there. It's really about China, Europe, and the United States, each pursuing a different internet control strategy. China, the Great Firewall, government control, government monitoring what's going on. Europe, very focused on privacy and individual privacy rights, I think at the expense of technology improvement. The United States with a much more disaggregated consumer-led approach, more of a laissez-faire approach, and frankly, on some issues like privacy, without a policy. And what the Russians have done simply magnifies those divisions.
So do you see that, we've got about 30 seconds before the next break, do you see Russia's moves accelerating some of those issues?
Yes, they're forcing companies to recalculate who they do business with and how they do business with in the digital space as well as in the ordinary commercial space. Russia is going to be the big loser on that, I think.
Yeah. We're going to continue our discussion with Bill Reinsch. We've got another segment to go, so please stay with us. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm here with Bill Reinsch. He is a contributor with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Bill, your last comments obviously set us up for the last discussion, which is about the big elephant in the room, or maybe the big panda bear in the room, which is the People's Republic of China. Lots of moving parts with them these days. Maybe give us your current assessment of the geopolitical as well as the economic situation with China.
Well, as far as the United States is concerned, I think the U.S. and China are drifting apart. Both governments maintain they don't want to force companies to choose between them. But in reality, both countries are pursuing policies that force companies to do exactly that. Xi Jinping has given speeches where he's talking about the Americans are unreliable suppliers. We need to go it alone. If you look at their 13th and 14th five-year plans, it's exactly what they intend to do. The Biden administration is talking about reshoring and nearshoring, moving more production back here. We're pulling apart, and it's not by force. Companies are making individual decisions based on their business models. But basically what's happening is we're all reassessing political risk. And if you look at the forced labor issue, and if you look at what's happened in Hong Kong, I think Western companies, United States companies in particular, are reassessing the risk of doing business in China. The Chinese don't make it easy. Companies in the apparel industry, for example, they're criticized in China if they don't use cotton from Xinjiang. They're criticized in the United States if they do use cotton from Xinjiang. Nobody likes to be in that position. And what that pushes companies to do is get out of that situation. And that means over time, altering supply chains to put the Chinese content somewhere else. The problem that companies have for America is that for a lot of them, particularly in information communications technology, China is simultaneously the best customer and the biggest threat. They need the money they're making there to invest in new products, next generation technology.
Right.
At the same time, China has made very clear it wants to outcompete them, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that.
I gotta ask, because I gotta think there's some part of the Chinese leadership that is more than a little annoyed with Vladimir Putin right now. The Chinese have this vision of ascendancy. The status quo, in a way, was working for them. And now the status quo has been blown to bits by their erstwhile partner. Am I drawing too much out of this, or do you think that could be at least partially accurate?
No, I think you're exactly right. They won't say that.
No.
And they won't admit that. But I think you're right. The relationship between Russia and China has always been complicated. If you look at 400 years of it, they've been adversaries more often than they've been friends, and they compete. they compete in North Asia, they compete in Central Asia, and they compete for global stature. And I think that the Chinese are in a very awkward position right now. Western sanctions put them in a difficult position because what we have said via export controls is China cannot ship semiconductors, for example, to Russia if they were made with Western technology,
Right.
to have Western content. That's going to capture Chinese goods. I don't think, they don't want to overtly support the West because they have a relationship with Putin. I think, on the other hand, they're not really going to be all that disappointed if Russia is weakened and distracted and preoccupied in Europe.
Right.
That is not terrible for China. I think they'll provide some support, but it will be minimal and it will be under the table. Believe me, we'll know about it, but it won't be announced, and it's not going to be something that they brag about.
Yeah, I know it's something we'll be certainly watching, and I know you'll be watching it too. Bill Reinsch, thank you for your presentation today. Very important for our viewers to get your point of view at CSIS, and certainly for your sake and your family's sake and your pet's sake, I hope that the supply chain issues do get sorted out.
The dog food is back, yes. Thank you very much, Tony. It's a pleasure to be with you always.
For sure. Thank you. Thanks again to Bill Reinsch in Washington, D.C. with his perspective on Russia, Ukraine, China, all of these interlocking parts that affect your life. Thanks for watching as well.